going to go next to Dakota Wagner, who is the Southeast Region Coordinator for the Forest Stewards Guild. She's going to talk a little bit about collaborative forest restoration they've been working on in the Southern Blue Ridge.
Yeah, hey everybody, my name is Dakota Wagner, and like Laurel said, I'm the Southeast Region Coordinator with the Forest Stewards Guild, and today I'm going to talk about a couple things. The first is just the Guild, for some of you who may not know much about us and what we do, and the second is one of the projects that we have going on right now that focuses on collaborative forest restoration in the Southern Blue Ridge. All right, so first, who is the Forest Stewards Guild? The Forest Stewards Guild is a 25-year-old national nonprofit organization that focuses on making ecologically, economically, and socially responsible forestry the professional standard. We have field offices around the country, starting with our headquarters in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then stretching all the way to the forests of Maine. And our mission is to practice and promote forestry that maintains the integrity of forest ecosystems and human communities dependent upon them. And to me, this integrity piece really just means that ecological structure and ecological function of the forest. And so we achieve this mission through a combination of research, policy analysis, training, education, to some degree advocacy, and boots on the ground action. And this boots on the ground action can look like a variety of activities in each region, such as ecological monitoring in the Southwest, management plan development in the Southeast, and applied restoration in the Lake States, and more. And we're somewhat unique in the environmental nonprofit subsector, as we have both a professional membership program and a project-based program. And so Guild membership, much like SAF or another organization, includes professional members that are mostly natural resource practitioners, affiliate members like landowners and other interested parties, like I'm pretty sure my parents are affiliate members, and student members and retired professional members. And as a member of the Guild, you make a commitment to take on a series of guiding stewardship principles in your approach to forest management. And the most important principle is what we call our first duty principle. And this states that your first duty as a forester, a landowner, or land manager is to the forest and its future. And so here in the Southeast, the Guild has had a presence for several years, but we've been rapidly expanding for the last couple of years. And in fact, one of our first meetings that kind of birthed the Forest Stewards Guild was held at the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina in 1995. And our program list has grown a lot in the past 2 to 3 years specifically, with projects happening on the ground in several southeastern states. And just as an example, here are a couple of them. First is our Sandy Mush Collaborative Forest Restoration Project. It's a community forestry project where we've been working with the Sandy Mush community in Western North Carolina to promote healthy working forests and remove invasive plants. And then our shortleaf pine ecosystem restoration project, where we work to restore shortleaf ecosystems on the Cumberland Plateau of Tennessee and Kentucky through various restoration activities, including prescribed burning. And then in the lower Mississippi alluvial valley and Atlantic coastal plain, our ecological forestry and bottomland hardwoods forest project works to promote wildlife forestry practices in these special, beautiful bottomland forests. And then our Southern Blue Ridge Forestry and Conservation Project, which is the focus of the rest of today's presentation, really focuses on linking conservation goals to forest-based supply chains in Western North Carolina. And in each of these projects, we partner with local expertise to implement and educate about forestry practices that align with the Guild's mission. Okay, so to frame the scope of this project, the Southern Blue Ridge ecoregion is one of the most biologically significant ecoregions in the United States. Its 9.4 million acres spans portions of Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. And this project focuses primarily on the sections in North Carolina. And there are 136 natural terrestrial communities that have been identified in the region, and over 90% of these are considered endemic or limited to the ecoregion. And our forests are very diverse. We have nearly 400 rare plant species. And not only with plants and trees are we diverse, but they are utilized by several different people and purposes, such as recreation and aesthetics, wood products, ecosystem services, and more. And so it's really important. We've thought that this project could make a really great impact in this area just because we are super diverse in what we have and what we use it for. And so our vision is to have healthy and resilient working forests in the southern Blue Ridge ecoregion of North Carolina. And what we want to do is we want to link conservation engagement by a variety of landowners to forest-based supply chains. And so what do we mean by supply chains? So we are partnering with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative on this project to incorporate conservation practices into their fiber sourcing standard. And this fiber sourcing standard really distinguishes SFI from all other forest certification programs, in that it sets mandatory practice requirements for the responsible procurement of all fiber sourced directly from the forest, whether or not the forest itself is certified. And so this standard holds the individual mills and manufacturers accountable for promoting responsible forestry. And the most recent standards, the 2015 to 2019, that's been extended to 2021 due to COVID, includes things such as taking measures to broaden biodiversity, following BMPs to protect water quality, using trained harvesting professionals, incorporating forestry research, prioritizing landowner outreach, as well as 8 other required objectives. And so there really is an opportunity to fill the gaps between these landowners, procurement foresters, and mills with actions that increase forest stewardship at every level of the supply chain. And by doing this, we do it by integrating sustainable practices into the practices of one or more of the subscribers to this fiber sourcing standard. So for a little bit of our project background, in phase 1 of this project, the Guild and SFI hosted the Southern Blue Ridge Forestry and Conservation Stakeholder Meeting in Asheville back in the fall. And this event just brought together natural resource experts and practitioners to help identify what conservation targets we had that have the potential to be positively influenced by responsible forest management. And so we are using the open standards for the practice of conservation framework to help guide this planning process, but we're not necessarily putting together a full-blown strategic plan. Ideally, the actions we come up with will fit into the actions of what some organizations and agencies are already doing. And so participants helped create a draft conceptual model that highlights our conservation targets, the threats to those targets, and develop strategies to overcome those threats and positively influence our targets. And from the expertise offered by our stakeholders and collaborators, we are putting together a plan of action that really integrates strategies into the practices of one or more subscribers to the fiber sourcing standard in the Southern Blue Ridge of Western North Carolina. And so in putting together this plan of action, we are still in the planning phase of this project. And so far we have distilled and agreed upon 2 main conservation targets that are mountain cove forests and mountain oak forests. And we have defined both of these targets using the North Carolina Natural Heritage Program definitions of each forest type. And the goals for each of these forest type and each of our targets are the same, and that is to restore and maintain forest structure and composition appropriate to each forest type. All right, and so this next slide, I'm just warning you, it looks a little bit like spaghetti, but I'm going to try and explain it in a way that makes sense. So first, I want to mention that conservation is a nonlinear process, and many of the threats and strategies overlap. And so in order for this to make sense today and not overwhelm everybody, this is a very simplified version of the project's conceptual model. And this shows just a basic overview of our targets, like our mountain cove forests, mountain oak forests, some identified threats, and our current strategies. And so a few threats, these orange boxes that you see, that were identified by our stakeholders are altered species composition, limitations of BMPs in certain ecosystems, incompatible forest practices such as high grading and lack of site-appropriate prescribed fire, and economic constraints for private landowners to implement ecological restoration practices. And so we've also come up with a list of potential strategies that you can see here in the yellow. And so, for example, if you just want to follow one of them, based on several stakeholder meetings, these strategies have been talked about so far. We've talked about 3, and it was agreed that we will increase collaboration on restoration treatments including increasing the capacity for prescribed fire to address the altered species composition in mountain oak forests. And we will also explore ways to enhance BMPs to reflect local ecological needs to address the deteriorating aquatic health in mountain cove forests. And so we are using this conceptual model developed by our collaborators and stakeholders as a roadmap to decide where we want to go on our conservation journey. And we don't plan to explore every stop on the map in the same detail because we have a timeline of about 3 years for this project, but we'll more focus on what our collaborators care about the most and what's the most feasible. And so this list of strategies will help guide us in deciding what actions we want to do to reach our vision of healthy and resilient working forests in the southern Blue Ridge ecoregion of North Carolina. Okay, so the example I'm going to share today, luckily one of the strategies that has generated the most excitement among our collaborators is increasing the capacity of prescribed fire, which is perfect for today's meeting. And so within this strategy, we have talked about several objectives and things we hope to accomplish, but the first is to assist existing networks. We will identify and assist existing networks to increase the capacity for prescribed fire in mountain oak forests of the southern Blue Ridge. And so what does this look like? What are we actually going to do to make this happen? And so we came up with a few potential activities to work within this strategy. And one of the first one is to support the fire learning network activities for natural resource professionals, including training and education about prescribed fire in mountain oak forests. And another potential activity is to support the fire learning network and fire adapted communities activities that engage private landowners in prescribed fire activities. And then another potential activity is to assist in the development of decision-making tools for managing mountain oak forests using prescribed fire, such as desired landscape conditions for southern Blue Ridge forests, mapping tools, or other regional guidelines. And overall, with all of these activities, the big thing is connecting SFI's fiber sourcing certified procurement entities to the importance of using prescribed fire as a tool for restoration, especially post-harvest, is a way to build support for positive action downstream through the supply chain. All right, and so to conclude, just to give a recap of everything that I talked about, this was very much a brief overview. And like I said before, we are still in the planning phase of this project. The timeline has been pushed back slightly due to COVID. We can no longer meet in person. And so trying to figure out ways to meet virtually in a way that doesn't put everybody on a Zoom call for 8 hours in one day has pushed the timeline back a little bit. The what? So we are linking conservation engagement by a variety of landowners to forest-based supply chains. And why are we doing this? To fill the gaps between landowners, procurement foresters, and mills with opportunities to increase forest stewardship at every level of the supply chain. And who is doing this? It's multiple collaborators throughout the region that are experts in their field and passionate about forest conservation. And how we're doing this is that collaborators are coming together to build a plan for action to work together to positively influence forest conservation in the southern Blue Ridge by connecting SFI's fiber sourcing certified procurement entities to restoration efforts. And I just want to mention here that realistically, there are limits to what an SFI program participant can reasonably implement towards conservation targets, especially when multiple entries are required. And so by partnering with other entities that are better suited to implement certain management practices like prescribed fire, we can achieve broad positive conservation impact that includes commercial harvesting and non-commercial tending treatments. And all of this will hopefully conclude with reaching our vision of healthy and resilient working forests in the southern Blue Ridge of North Carolina. And so that wraps up my presentation today. If anybody has any questions, I think we have a couple extra minutes right now. And then of course, if you have other questions and want to email me, you can see my email right here. It's just dakota@forestguild.org, and I'd love to talk to you.